All right, we're back for another deep dive. You know the drill. Humble self-concept method. We're knee-deep in it now. Assessed the self-concept, defined our target, humble self-concepts, and now comes the big one. Step 3. Reframing memories, the ones that, still make you cringe a bit, even after all these years.
Oh yeah, those memories, the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment, they can really stick with you.
It's wild how they just keep playing on a loop sometimes, shaping how we see ourselves, even when, logically, we know better. But the good news is, with step 3, we're not trying to erase those memories. We're using the THSC to see them differently.
Right, it's not about pretending they didn't happen. It's about reinterpreting those events, through this new lens of how our self-concept is evolving.
I like that. It's like those memories were written in a language we didn't get back then. Now with the THSC, we're finally starting to decipher it.
That's a great way to put it. And, as we reframe these memories, something pretty amazing happens. We start to actually internalize those core THSC principles:
Yeah.
inherent worth, self-compassion, and the capacity for growth.
Okay, so it's like we're slowly swapping out that old, super self-critical script with a new one that's built on, like, understanding and acceptance. But, okay, how long does that whole internalizing thing usually take?
Well, it's not exactly a quick fix, is it? It's a journey. Everyone's is unique, of course. Some memories will be easier to reframe than others. That's normal. But the sources really hammer on patience and consistency here.
Got it. So not about rushing to fix everything overnight, more about gradually changing our perspective bit by bit.
Exactly. It's all about practice. The more we practice looking at those past experiences through our THSE lens, the more those principles just become part of how we think, like building a new mental pathway.
Okay, that makes sense. But for someone who's just starting out with step 3, what does that look like practically? Where do they even begin?
Well, the sources actually give a pretty clear step-by-step guide. The first thing is to pick a memory. Could be a specific event, or even, just a recurring pattern, something that triggers those icky feelings.
Yeah.
Guilt, shame, embarrassment.
So not just this vague feeling of, ugh, I messed up, but an actual specific thing you can really dig into.
Right, and then you gotta analyze those feelings. What are the exact emotions that come up? Shame, guilt, regret. Why? Why do you feel that way? What are the beliefs about yourself that are feeding those emotions?
Becoming like an emotional detective, uncovering the evidence that's been shaping how you see yourself.
Exactly. And once you've nailed down those beliefs, that's where you start applying the THSC. How does your inherent worth change how you look at that situation? Can you be compassionate toward your past self, understanding that they were doing their best with what they knew at the time?
Like throwing a lifeline of understanding back to your younger self.
I love that. And then from that place of understanding, you can start to reframe the narrative. Using those THSC principles, can you rewrite the story of that memory? What changes when you factor in inherent worth, capacity for growth, the need for self-compassion?
Instead of just getting hung up on the what ifs and the should haves,
Yeah.
you start looking for the lessons learned, the potential for growth.
You got it. Which leads to the next step, which might be the toughest one: self-forgiveness. Can you accept that your past self, flaws and all, was still worthy of love and compassion?
This is where it gets real, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being critical of our past selves is easy, but offering forgiveness, that's a whole other level.
It is, but that's where the THSC really shines. It reminds us that we all mess up. We're all a work in progress, and those imperfections, they don't diminish our inherent worth.
It's like finally giving yourself permission to be human.
Exactly, and that permission, that acceptance, that's what sets you free.
I think that idea of self-forgiveness, that's really where the magic happens for a lot of people. It's like you've been, I don't know, holding yourself hostage to this past version of yourself, and then bam, the door swings open.
It's powerful stuff. And it's not just about letting go of the past either. This shift, it can change how you approach, well, everything. The present, the future, you name it.
Totally. But I bet some people listening are thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but what if I can't even figure out what those underlying beliefs are in the first place? The ones driving all those negative emotions.
That's a classic roadblock, and it shows just how deep those beliefs can be buried. Sometimes they're working behind the scenes, shaping our thoughts and actions without us even knowing it.
Like trying to find buried treasure with no map? Where do you even start digging?
Well, a good trick is to pay attention to how you talk to yourself. When you're thinking about that memory, what kind of language pops up? Are you being super judgy, critical, or just dismissive of your past self?
Ah, so those negative thoughts, they're actually clues. They can point to the beliefs we're trying to unearth.
Exactly. It's like they're whispers from your subconscious, right? Revealing those stories you've been telling yourself about who you are, what you can and can't do.
Okay, so let's say you've identified those beliefs.
Mhm.
How do you start challenging them, especially if they've been, reinforced for years by experiences or what other people have told you?
That's where the THSC is such a game changer. It gives you this brand new framework, new lenses to see those old beliefs through.
So instead of just accepting them as truth, you hold them up to your THSC and ask, do these fit with my inherent worth, my capacity for growth, the compassion I deserve?
You got it. And chances are those old beliefs just won't stand up to that kind of scrutiny. They crumble when you hit them with the THSC principles.
But even when, logically, that a belief is irrational, it can still be so hard to let go. It's like they had this gravitational pull dragging you back into those old thought patterns.
Oh, absolutely. It takes work to unlearn stuff that's been ingrained for so long. It's like carving a new groove into a record. You're replacing that scratchy old tune with something smoother, something more harmonious.
And I imagine self-compassion is huge here. Like you're being patient with yourself, understanding that you're going to stumble, make mistakes along the way.
Self-compassion is everything. It's the key to breaking free from that cycle of self-criticism. It lets you see your imperfections without judgment. You start to realize, hey, making mistakes is part of being human.
So we're not expecting to be perfect at this whole reframing memories
Yeah.
thing, right? We're giving ourselves space to struggle, knowing that every step forward, even a tiny one, is a win.
That's the spirit. It's about progress, not perfection. And with each act of self-compassion, you get more resilient. It becomes easier to face those tough memories head on.
It's like building a muscle, the muscle of self-acceptance. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
And that strength spills over into everything you do. You might find yourself more confident, more resilient when things get rough, and definitely more compassionate toward others.
So reframing memories isn't just about the past. It's about building a better, stronger present and future.
Absolutely. It's about taking back your story, trading in those narratives of shame and guilt for ones of growth, resilience, and, just straight up self-love.
Now, we touched on earlier how tricky this whole process can be, especially for people who really rely on external validation. Can you dive into that a bit more? How does that self-validation dynamics framework thing tie into all of this?
This is where it gets really interesting. See, this framework talks about two different mindsets: validation scarcity and validation abundance. When you're coming from validation scarcity, you're constantly searching for approval from outside sources. You're basing your worth on what other people think. And that makes your self-concept, well, fragile, vulnerable to criticism.
It's like building a house on sand. One good wave and the whole thing gets washed away.
Perfect analogy. So for someone stuck in that mindset, reframing memories can feel super threatening. It's like those past mistakes, they're exposing the cracks in their foundation, shaking their whole sense of self.
So then how does working through step 3 of the HSCM help someone shift to that validation abundance mindset?
By consistently using the THSC, you start to see that your worth doesn't depend on what you achieve or what other people say. It's inherent. It's unchanging. It's always there.
It's like finding this inner wellspring of self-validation. Suddenly those outside voices just don't have the same power anymore.
That's it exactly. As you internalize the THSC and you reframe those memories, you're basically building a stronger, more solid base for your self-concept, one that can handle the storms of criticism from outside.
So with step 3, you're not only healing those old wounds, but you're also building a deeper, tougher sense of self.
You got it. It's about knowing that your worth comes from inside, not from the fleeting approval of others.
This has been such an insightful look at step 3. We've covered a ton, from finding those hidden beliefs to the incredible power of self-forgiveness. But you know what? Let's take a breather here. We'll be back in a sec with some tips for handling all the, emotional stuff that comes with step 3. And of course, we'll leave you with something to chew on as you keep exploring this whole humble self-concept method thing.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been digging into step 3 of the HSCM, and honestly, it can get pretty intense, emotionally speaking.
No doubt about it. Reframing memories, especially the ones that bring up shame or guilt, it forces you to confront some pretty deep-seated beliefs you have about yourself.
So how do we deal with all those emotions? What do the sources say about, not getting totally overwhelmed by all those feelings?
One thing they really stress is approaching those emotions with curiosity. Don't resist them. Instead of pushing them down or ignoring them, Let yourself really feel them.
Easier said than done, though, isn't it? I mean, it's natural to want to avoid uncomfortable feelings.
Oh, for sure. But the sources say that when you try to suppress those emotions, it actually makes them stronger. It's like, I don't know, trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It's just going to pop back up with even more force.
Okay, so we're not trying to bypass those emotions. We're trying to acknowledge them, understand them.
Exactly. And remember, those emotions, even the yucky ones, they're giving you valuable information. They can help you pinpoint those hidden beliefs that are influencing how you see yourself.
All right, so we're feeling the feelings, we're getting curious about them. What else can we do to make this whole process feel a little safer, a little less scary?
The sources talk a lot about self-compassion. Think about it this way. If you had a friend who is struggling with a similar memory, what would you say to them? What kind of support would you offer?
That's a good point. We tend to be so much kinder to other people than we are to ourselves.
Right. So try to give yourself that same kindness. Remind yourself that you're doing your best, that everyone messes up sometimes, and that those mistakes don't define who you are.
Like, you're becoming your own best friend, cheering yourself on every step of the way.
Love that. And, you don't have to go through this alone. Having a support system can make a world of difference.
So maybe that means seeing a therapist, joining a support group, or even just talking to a trusted friend.
Exactly. Sharing your experiences with someone who gets it, someone who can offer empathy, it can help you feel less alone, less overwhelmed.
What about those times when it all feels like just too much? Like you're getting stuck, or you just feel totally overwhelmed?
Well, first off, be patient with yourself. Go at your own pace. Reframing memories is deep work. It's okay to take breaks when you need them.
So we're not going for speed here. We're going for sustainable growth.
You got it. And remember, progress isn't always a straight line. There will be days when those old beliefs feel super strong, almost impossible to shake. That's normal. It's all part of the journey.
It's like climbing a mountain. There are going to be steep parts, rocky parts, but with each step, you're getting closer to the top.
I like that. And that view from the top, that feeling of freedom and self-acceptance, it's worth every bit of effort.
This has been such an eye-opening look at Step 3. As we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
If the thought of reframing those memories feels daunting, just remember, start small. Pick one memory that feels manageable and work through it mindfully, with a lot of self-compassion.
So it's all about taking those small, consistent steps, trusting that over time, those little shifts in perspective will add up to something really big.
That's it. You have the power to rewrite your story. Embrace that power and go on this journey of self-discovery with curiosity, courage, and a whole lot of self-love.
Well said. And everyone listening, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. As you keep exploring the humble self-concept method, remember, you are worthy, you are capable, and you absolutely have the power to create a kinder, more fulfilling relationship with yourself. See you next time.